We knew the Houston Cougars would be riding their guard play all season long. We didn't know it was going to look quite like that as Houston knocks off Cincinnati 67-60 to start off Big 12 play 1-0.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater that came to stop by, thank you for making us your first listen of the post game, your first listen before you go to bed, the first listen next morning, or anywhere in between, making Locked On Cougs the most listened to Houston Cougar podcast out there, and making the Locked On Sports Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. If you enjoy the conversation down below and you don't know what to say, tell us, honestly, what your reaction was to Emanuel Sharp's first points being in the final 20 seconds or whatever it was of that basketball game. It was an ugly one, but Houston wins 67-60. We're talking to you about it in an episode today brought to you by FanDuel, best place to get on the action with all kinds of stuff going on Fridays for basketball season. Houston wins 67-60. I want to talk about how this was a game of runs, guard play and rotations, talk about some everyday All Access subscriber questions, and of course, we'll get into some Nightcaps as well. Nightcaps in the afternoon, a little bit odd. That's what we're going to be doing here at Locked On Cougs. Man, oh man, lots to talk about in that one. Houston again wins 67-60. Kingston Flemings has 19 points, leads the way early. He had 10 points and 2 assists in the first half. That felt like it was the only thing happening on Houston's offense side of the floor. The runs happened. I mean, it was a slow start. It was 4-4 at the under 12-minute timeout. This was an ugly basketball game in an offensive kind of sense. Things kind of skew Houston's way in those typically, but then Cincinnati got hot early. Cincinnati went on a run. At one point, it was a 9-point lead when Houston had just 8 points. That didn't look great. Houston managed to tie it up. Houston managed to get it even. And then suddenly, Day Thomas over at Cincinnati, who I found out at some point today has a first name that is 2 words. I misspelled that. My bad, Day. I just had no space there. But anyway, he went on a 10-0 run of his own to end the first half, and it looked like things were all Cincinnati. Houston was out of the half. They're like, okay, Freshmen, first road game of the season. Yes, it is the first true road game of the season. Maybe Sampson can talk them into something and open things and get things going. And instead, the first half was kind of the precursor to the second, and that the second half opened with a bunch of Cincinnati runs again. Cincinnati got up as many as 10 points again later in the second half, kind of flirted with that 10-point margin until Milos Uzan went on his run of threes. He had back-to-back threes and back-to-back possessions to quickly cut the lead to 4. And then Houston toyed around with the sum, took a lead here, took a lead there. Kingston Flemings drive here. Milos Uzan hits a mid-range there. Like, things started moving Houston's way. You notice through all of this scoring, I never, ever said Emmanuel Sharp's name. Emmanuel Sharp did not hit a field goal in this basketball game. He is Houston's leading scorer this season. He was 0 of 9 from the field in 28 minutes. He immediately had a short first half with foul trouble. We've heard about an injured finger over the break. He's holding us back at one point, but he was 0 of 5 from behind the arc, 0 of 9 from the field. He had 2 points at the foul line in the final seconds when Cincinnati was fouling to try to get the ball back. It was not pretty. But because of his buddies, Kingston and Milos, Houston managed to hold on. I want to stress Kingston Flemings up and down the court here looked like a different kind of athlete. He made freshman mistakes, no doubt, right? Missed a rotation on the backside in the final 5 minutes. Missed a box out early. I went back over the guy on Twitter about that, like, why that's not the biggest of sins, but sure, right? Ultimately, this team is shifting into Kingston's and then whoever else is hot at that second guard spot. Whereas usually Emanuel Sharp hitting a bunch of threes, this game they were kind of running him ragged, and Milos Uzan was the guy who was able to pull up from 3. His ultimate dagger shot down the stretch really kind of sealed the deal here. I see some guys here that hopefully went to FanDuel to do it, but saying they cashed in down the stretch in the live action because of some of that action. But Milos Uzan hits a 3. there's a couple minutes left. And he gets the ball at about just inside the jump circle, and it looks like he's just setting up the offense. He just kind of walks his dribble down the 3-point line, and he then pulls up from the top of the key, splashes a three. Houston goes up three, does not look back. And I have to say, I felt like that was obviously like the confidence boost that this team just need to get a late lead and hold on to it, and that was what they got. Now, there were good offensive moments elsewhere. I thought Isaiah Harwell played scrappy, tough basketball. I thought Ramon Walker, we'll talk about some in a second, played an important role. They admittedly, they ran out Mercy Miller, said, hey, can Mercy Miller get some offense going? Hey, can Chase McCarty get some offense going? And in admittedly limited action, they really kind of couldn't. And so Houston was, okay, well, do we go to Chris Cenac? And Chris Cenac's offense, 0-3 from 3, didn't get too physical down low on offense anyway. He pulled up 8 rebounds. That was important, but he really had trouble getting his own offense going. A guy that is an offensive mismatch and get to the shots he wants wasn't able to knock down those shots. Tugler finished 8 points, including a couple of big putbacks late, had a gigantic assist on a kick out to Kingston Flemings in the final few minutes as well. That may have been the more impactful offensive performance, though, than Chris Cenac's. And ultimately, that's a big, big deal. Now, there were some lineup things happening in this one. Chris Cenac got a 4th foul, missed the final few minutes. We're like, wait a second, why isn't he back in the game yet? That, I think, is worth monitoring. That'll come up in the second segment. I also think that Khalifa Sako's 12 minutes were really impactful. He went 3 of 3 shooting the ball, all 3 inside, obviously. Had 1 big rebound, but Sako's presence, I think, alleviated a lot of things for Houston defensively. And it wasn't that I don't think he had any blocks or steals. It was more about having another body to throw down there besides Tugler, besides Chris. Chris has proven to be more of a stretch 4 than a 5 in a lot of ways, right? And that's a real big deal here. Cornholio, who's the constant troll, and I do appreciate Cornholio, says that Houston needs to sign Hakeem. And given the way that that pro players apparently come back to play in college basketball, that may be not the worst idea. Here he's got like a year of eligibility left, right? That's probably part of it. No, so anyway, I think that Houston's got a lot of things here. I want to give credit to Cincinnati as well. They've always played Houston tough. As I mentioned, the pregame preview episode, that they've played every year because of the American Athletic Conference as well. In the last 10 matchups, Houston has won 9, but 6 of those have been single-digit differences. Always, and this is now the 7th out of 11, a really, really competitive matchup always. Wes Miller can't quite get over the Kelvin Sampson hump, but Cincinnati and their fans really do always show out for the Cougs and make that a tough place to play. Day Thomas, I mentioned, had 10 points right there before halftime. He finished just 15, and so he had 2 at the early part and 3 in the second half. I think that means that whatever Kelvin Sampson said to do to Day seemed to work. Jizzle James, who's had his good games against Houston in the past, finished with just 4 points. The big thing to me were the 2 bigs for Cincinnati, Mustafa Diam and Baba Miller, finished with 13 and 11. Diam hit a 3, wild. And then I feel like as we look at that outcome, Cincinnati might have been holding on for a lifeline, right? They had a less than impressive regular or non-conference part of the regular season. They're hoping to make some splashes in the Big 12. They were 8-5 coming in, and now they're 8-6. Houston finishes at 13, or after this game, finished up at 13-1 with a big game against Texas Tech on Tuesday. And I got some questions about that in the subtext. I got some questions about rotations in the subtext, and I want to make sure we give those guys and those questions time as well. But before we get to any of that, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Rougiette, because we're going to talk about something that most men don't want to bring up. Absolutely should bring up. Stress from work, money life does not just switch off at night, shows up at the worst possible time. Rougiette is designed to help you take back control. To 3 clinically proven ingredients, 1 mint dissolves into your tongue. Scientific formula, you connect with board-certified doctors online, but ships discreetly so no one has to know anything from looking at your door. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now is the time. At Rougiette.com/LockedOnCollege. It's Rougiette, Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege. Get 15% off for a limited time. Rougiette ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. Locked On Cougs is part of the Everydayer Club as well. Thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen today and making Locked On Sports Podcast Network the one sports podcast network in the world. If you haven't already checked it out, you got to check out the Everydayer Club. It's more. It's not that you're getting any less Locked On Cougs, your typical feed. It's that with the Everydayer Club, you get even more access to ad-free audio, invite to the members-only Everydayer Club Discord server, all-access episodes of Locked On Cougs at the all-access tier, one-on-one texting with me via subtext. If you go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer or lockedоncougs.supercast.com, tap the link in the show notes if you want to know more about it. To lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer to join in on the club. Got a couple questions from that subtext we'll hit later in the episode. I want to look at a couple things in this one though, and I mentioned that Chris Cenac had a fourth foul. I thought it was a questionable foul in the second half of this basketball game, and ultimately, did not come back in. I don't believe he came back in at all. Certainly didn't come back in with any minutes of consequence. And one question from an Everydayer, shouts to the Everydayer Club, texted in Ramon Walker over Chris Cenac. And I believe, based on our conversation, this was talking about in those final minutes, once Chris had committed that foul, Houston never opted to go back to the probably one-and-done five-star freshman. They chose the veteran cultural warrior leader, Ramon Walker, as a small ball four instead of playing a huge lineup with Chris Cenac. This is also notable because Houston been going at the 1-2-2 zone for a stretch of the second half to kind of throw off once Cincinnati was trying to set up in rhythm. And once Cincinnati stopped making all of the threes, that worked a lot better. But the 1-2-2 works really well with Cenac in the back because of the size, the length, etc. And Ramon Walker kind of forces your hand defensively back to man, which is what they're more comfortable doing in years past. But ultimately, I think it really came down to who was going to make the appropriate defensive rotations, not rebounds. Chris did a pretty good job rebounding the basketball, had 8 in limited action. But I think this really came down to who did Kelvin Sampson trust in a crucial every basket counts kind of basketball game in making that backside off the ball rotation. And bluntly, I don't think that Sampson felt like he could have 2 freshmen out there and you can't take Kingston off the floor. A freshman will mess up rotations. It happens at every program, happens to every freshman. That's not unique to Houston. And unfortunately, that's not something that is immune from our own freshmen on our own team, right? Sampson takes too much pride in every possession. It's why they play with the lowest paces in college basketball in the 350s of a 360 team sport, right? In terms of pace and length of possessions. But when you have so few possessions, they're always going to be more important. And when they're that much more important, you can't have 2 guys out there that are liabilities in terms of rotation. And Kingston has set himself apart offensively. You can't not have him. So they try to find someone who can fill in for Chris on the defensive side. That has been Ramon Walker. Now, I want to stress, without knowing when Chris gets it and when it clicks and when the rotations start working and how much more work has to happen, because I do think all of that will happen, I could not be happier that it's Ramon Walker. He's a cultural warrior, been through physical injuries, mental stress, the whole, it's been a tough time for him working his way to this point, and to be in the game, that crucial situation, and to ultimately take a charge that got Houston the ball to secure the lead, I think shows exactly why Sampson had him in there and exactly why you and I love him as a Houston Cougar. It's diving on the floor as a freshman to get a rebound against Wichita State. It's falling down with the charge today. It's all of those things that are not scoring, aren't even necessarily rebounding, but impact winning in a positive way. Now, what's funny, I think the guy that does that the second best on the team in terms of those forwards and big guys is actually Isaiah Harwell, another freshman. Isaiah is still growing and learning other spots. He's still putting his offensive game back together after having so many injuries in high school. Had he never had those injuries in high school, this is the kind of guy that, man, I'm telling, go watch the pre-injury tape relative to his peers. He is really, really special. It's just taking time to get back there. But he still is throwing his body around so well and all that. Ramon Walker's having a very positive impact on, hey, like, Isaiah, this is how we get on the floor, bud. Follow me. And it's working. So, yes, to the Everydayer All Access member listener, Ramon Walker did finish this game over Chris Cenac for all intents and purposes in the important minutes. because he played better. He earned it. And I still think that Chris's ceiling is so incredibly high. I think that it will be a quicker switch than people realize. And I think that we've seen in some of the parts of these games, this one included, that Sampson will kind of let him make some mistakes in the first half and early in the second half and so on. It was down the stretch of the winning time moments of this one where he's like, no, we've had too many missed backside rotations. We can't have that happen, right? If Chris gets it, or if Kingston gets it, and we can let Chris be the guy, like, I think there's a real chance that that happens. I also think that because of the way the NBA treats multiple Clay and the high ceiling that Chris has, he may still ultimately be a one and done, even if he plays limited action. If you remember Jarris Walker, Houston's last one and done prospect, Jarris had moments where he was the best defender on the floor, obviously, but he also made a lot of mental mistakes and also had times where he'd Sampson would sub Jarris out because he missed a rotation, or I felt like once a game would sub out Jarris for fouling a jump shooter because you just can't do that. And he still, he finished the season on a very high note, and it was obviously also against American Athletic Conference competition in the regular season part. So I think that there's ways that this still works out. I don't think Chris is a finished product at all. I don't think anyone needs to be trashing anything like that. But in today's game, Ramon Walker gave it a better chance to win. And instead of gambling that, Sampson made sure they won the basketball game. And it's kind of along the same lines. I had people worried about, winning the basketball game on Tuesday. People already worried about Texas Tech on Tuesday. And I want to stress a couple things there, but every matchup is different. Every game is different. This was Houston's first true road game. Houston looked like a team that had not played in that environment. Now, admittedly, Auburn at Birmingham was a, air quotes, neutral floor. It was not neutral, right? But air quotes, it was. And so I think they had a little bit more practice than a team with none, but I think the road game aspect, the conference game aspect of that all showed up. Houston gets Tech at home on Tuesday. Fertitta's going to be loud. Now, there will be Tech fans there. They always travel well, but Fertitta will be nuts. I think this game helps Houston get ready for that game. I've not even checked what Tech did or does today. I admittedly was kind of getting more ready for Cincinnati. Tech Tuesday means I got a couple days to mentally prepare for that one, right? Tech is good. Yes. Tech beat Duke. Sure. Tech also lost to Arkansas, and Houston beat them at their place last year. McCaslin's a great coach. Sampson's a great coach. I'm not going to worry about this yet. I'm going to try and figure out what Houston learned in the game they just played and take that into that game. Now, I really classic troll Cornholio here chimes in with Texas Tech. Hopefully we can hold them to 0 the Tech way. Oh, I hope Tech fans see that. I hope. That's funny. That's good stuff. That's good wholehearted fun right there. I want to give out some nightcaps. Let you guys get about your weekend. Enjoy this one. Houston holds on to win 67-60, 1-0 in Big 12 play. The best conference in America. Houston looking to win a third year in a row. And let's talk about who I should say is important in doing that. Before we get to that, though, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel, because Fridays can already feel different during the basketball season. FanDuel is making them even better every Friday night. Before the games tip off, FanDuel is giving fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6:30 to 7:30 East, 6 to 7:30. I'm too excited. 6 to 7:30 Eastern. Become appointment viewing with NBA's Happy Hour. Easy to check the weekly special before tip-off. Make moves before the window closes. Timing's perfect right for the games, right for the weekend start. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping at the NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, a whole lot of Friday energy getting into the weekend. At the NBA Happy Hour, only at FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Park Ranger Locked on Coogs here. Remind you guys to join the Everyday Club. Thanks for being Locked on Coogs. Your first listen today, first listen to the post game, or your first listen the next day, whatever the case may be. Appreciate each and every listen. Thank you for making us that and making Locked on Coogs the number one sports podcast, part of the number one sports podcast network in the world, the Locked on Sports Podcast Network. You have not already checked out the Everyday Club. Get access to ad-free audio, invite the Everydayer Discord server, all access episodes special to Locked On Coogs, and to one-on-one texting access to me. So go to lockedoncoogs.supercast.com or go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer for more. Now, Houston finishes this one with a 67-60 win. Obviously, tip the cap, nightcap goes to Kingston Flemings, Milos Uzan, leading the way with 19 and 18 points respectively. At both the start with Kingston and the finish with Milos, it felt like if those two guys didn't have the ball in their hands, Houston was not going to score. And those are the most obvious kind of nightcaps to hand out, giving a nightcap, tip of the cap to those two guys. And I have to say that it's awesome to have those guys on your team. And when we questioned in the summer how they both play at the same time, I now don't want them to ever not play. Right? Kingston played 38 minutes. Milos played 32. And I feel like I needed every single one of them and maybe a little bit more. Lesser known nightcaps. We mentioned Ramon Walker. He gets a nightcap, tip of the cap, obviously an impressive effort. Played just 14 minutes, but the clutch minutes down the stretch, defensively in rotations, taking a charge, going after rebounds. And while he did not secure, he only got 2 rebounds, I guess, to his name. He tipped several, kept the ball alive, including one on a missed free throw. They forced a jump ball. He took the jump ball instead of traveling with it to make sure that Houston got it because Houston had the arrow. That ultimately sealed the deal in the most literal way. And so that's awesome. Especially like that coming in with Emmanuel Sharp and a rough day. John Peterson chimes in here about Emmanuel Sharp's potential injury. I don't think that it's one we're not aware of to John here. But to re-reference, I should point out that Emmanuel Sharp did injure a finger over the holiday break. He's playing with it. It's not even taped up, so I don't know how bad it is. It didn't sound like it was his shooting hand or anything like that, but I do think that is still there very much as for a sharp shooting score to have 0 of 9 from the field. Certainly makes sense there. It would make sense that there's an injury there. JoJo Tugler, I thought, played particularly well. I should also point out that we criticize him when he fouls out and gets in foul trouble in a tightly whistled game, a game where Houston had 16 fouls and Cincinnati had 13, and they were trying to foul at the end. Don't get me started down that road. JoJo Tugler had just 3 fouls, played 26 minutes because he had a couple of them early together, but to come back in the second half, play as sturdy and as strong as he did, while only committing 1 second half foul, I think was really important. If we're gonna criticize him when he does it wrong, tip the cap for when he does it right. Nightcap to JoJo Tugler. And how about Houston as a squad? 1-0 in the Big 12. That's another Big 12 opener heading into year 3 in the conference, looking to win it 3 straight years. I'm gonna go enjoy the rest of my Saturday. You should too, as a victorious Houston Cougar. Remember to subscribe to the bell so you know when things go live and join the Everydayer Club. Get some bonus content by Monday morning. We'll be back for your regularly scheduled episode then as well. The portal is open. I have another episode out today, actually, out in the ether. If you're going to check out what Houston's doing in the portal, we'll be obviously breaking in with things as they unfold. Locked On Coogs is the number one part of the number one sports podcast network, the Locked On Podcast Network, and the most listened to Houston Cougar podcast out there. Signing off as always, go Cougs.